Hello everyone, welcome to International Business. This is unit number 4. In unit number 4, we're going to be talking about ethics, corporate social responsibility, and sustainability. So let's try to dig in first. So the first, I want you to watch this video, which is about doing ethical business abroad. Here, for example, the company, the Body Shop, has multiple policies of doing sustainable production or supply chain, sustainable supply chain by doing a fair trade with the communities in Africa and some other countries. So here you can see, for example, how they do it. They have multiple videos about their different products, but I think you can start by just watching this one. So in this case, we're going to be talking about what is business ethics. So in this case, for example, we're going to be talking, when we talk about ethics, we talk about those principles accepted, whether something is right or wrong, the way that you conduct yourself, the way you do business, the way you do things. And then, of course, in this matter, we have to think of business ethics, which is how we conduct business in the right way without. And be careful, this is not just infringing the law, because you can do everything according to the law, but still you can do things wrong. Still you can abuse employees in ways that the law is not specified. So it's also, we have to think about that. Then we have the ethical strategy, which is also we have to see how we're going to launch a strategy that helps the people, that supports the society, the community, the environment, and we have a more ethical approach towards our society, right? So here we're going to talk about a couple things, like, for example, employment practices, human rights, environmental pollution, and corruption, which is mostly the most common ethical issues in business. So in this case, for example, we talk about employment practices and human rights. So here we have the question of what is the responsibility of a foreign multinational when operating in a country that is not there. So should we follow the working conditions that we follow in the host nation? Meaning, for example, if I'm an American company, should I follow the same principles in, let's say, for example, Turkey or Indonesia or whatever I'm producing? So I think you have to do it. I mean, personally, I think you have to do it. There has been many cases, for example, Nike, that their sweatshops have come under fire because the production is not, I mean, the salaries, the working conditions are terrible. So in this case, in the end, people get to know that regardless you portray yourselves as Nike, fantastic brand, in the end, you are not sustainable. You are not having a good employment practices. So again, that we should do that. No? So we have to think of that whenever we go to another country, of the employment practices and the human rights we're going to practice, and not just abuse other communities just because we can. We also talk about environmental pollution. In this case, we talk about how also going to other countries and say, well, because it's not my country, I can just dispose all the chemicals in whichever way I want. So it doesn't work that way. We have to also be responsible for the pollution in other countries. The same thing for corruption. How are we going to deal with corruption? Because sometimes it's easier to make decisions faster when the officers are corrupted in a certain country. So how we're going to deal with that administratively, and how we're going to deal with that if it's necessary, because sometimes we cannot move forward. The authorities are not clean enough to say this is not under the law. This is not under the law because I don't want to. Okay, so we have to think of that. So again, it says, some argue that paying bribes might be the price of doing a greater good. Here we have again the ethics, and we have to face it according to the different ethical theories. If we're talking about relativism, we're doing it for the greater good of everyone, then yeah, maybe we're setting up a factory. So if we bribe the officers, we will have 3,000 employment. We generate 3,000 employments there. So in this case, we can say yes, relatively it works, no, but in the end, that shouldn't happen in any case. So in this case, we have again ethical dilemmas. Should I do something wrong for a greater good of the company in order to make more profit, in order to reach the goals that I have as a business? So here we have a lot of complex decisions because we have to deal with so many things, and then we have to take a decision. Here, for example, we have the case of child labor. It's still very common in many poor nations, and for us as employers abroad, we have to oversee the processes of hiring. We have to oversee the processes of who's working there, and not just say, well, they are outsourced and I didn't know anything, because that happens very often. The company say like, this is just outsourcing and I didn't know they had those working conditions, and I washed my hands and I didn't know anything. The case of many companies, they do that. So what are the roots of unethical behavior? We're going to talk about all of them here, right? So let's talk about each one of them. So in this case, we talk about firstly about personal ethics, which is this is your own personal approach to doing the right or the wrong thing. There's an approach that says, if you know you take a bad decision and you're going to appear on the news, would you do it? If the answer is no, I don't want to appear on the first page doing something wrong, that means wrong. So that is the thing, same thing. The second thing is the decision-making process. So unethical decisions mostly come because you fail to ask the relevant questions, and decisions are made based on economic logic. So if you just think of the numbers, most likely you will abuse someone's rights. So in this case, you have to be very, critical on how this decision affects everyone. We also can think of organizational culture. Your company is a naturally ethical company, or it's a company that is somehow known for doing shady business or unethical practices. Here, for example, we have the case of Monsanto seeds. So for them, they have faced a lot of criticism because of their business practices and how they affect local communities. So for them, they say internally that they are trying to grow communities and so, but in practice it's a different story. So here we have already bad image about them, right? We also face unethical behavior because of unrealistic performance goals, which is we want to produce more, but producing more always comes at the expense of something or someone. So it could be the environment, maybe because I'm using materials that can yield more, but they pollute more, or I can produce more, but employees are underpaid or working extra hours or working in not good conditions. Okay. Also could be the leadership. We have to see whether we have ethical leadership. The bosses, the big bosses are the ones setting the example or not, or from the very beginning, they are the ones giving the instructions of do whatever you have to do in order to get it done. So we have to talk about that. We have to think if the leadership is setting a right example or not. Then we have the societal culture, the culture of the society. So in this case, ethical policies change by country. In every country, in one country is right, in another may not be. We have countries that are absolutely against corruption. We have the case, for example, of Norway, New Zealand, Singapore. Corruption is highly penalized. It's very badly seen in society. Singapore, they have done a fantastic work in the past 60 years to really change the behavior of the people. So in this case, we can talk about that. We can talk about how in some societies corruption is not well seen, right? Or we can talk about again just general ethics, which is some things like, for example, in our Korean society, paying less to women. That's not a good approach, or sometimes abusing people, right? So again, it's part of society sometimes, and we have to change the whole society for it to happen. So we have a couple of philosophical approaches to the ethics, and of course we will always choose which ones we're gonna use in order to justify our behavior in case we're gonna take some decisions, right? So first of all, we have the Friedman Doctrine. The Friedman Doctrine says, when it comes to ethics, says if you, as a company, your responsibility is to make money, and how you make money doesn't matter. Why? Because in this ethical doctrine, is we generate money, we generate jobs, we generate economic growth, and that's good for the country. Let's look at the example of Samsung. So they say if Samsung makes money and makes a country better, so be it, even if there's unethical practices. So that's how sometimes it's justified. Then we have the cultural relativism. So in the cultural relativism is I go and set up in another country business, and they are doing, let's say for example, they are doing industrial waste, they are throwing it in the river, and I go there and I see all the companies doing it, and I can do it properly, but I have to pay more. So if everybody's doing it, I'll just do it. So that's the justification. So good justification is not. So we have the righteous moralist, which is he says we are going to do the same practice at home and abroad. In my home I behave well, abroad I behave well. So in this case, then that works. Actually, is one of the best ones. No? Then we have the naive immoralist, which is the actions are ethically justified if everyone else is doing the same thing. So the same thing, if everyone does it, why not? It's very similar to the cultural relativism, right? So, but in this one, you pretend that you don't know. In naive immoralist, it's like I didn't know. I didn't know that I couldn't do that. Then we have the utilitarian approach, and I make here a small parenthesis because earlier I said relativism, but I was talking about utilitarian. The utilitarian is you do one action for the greater good of everyone. So in this case, for example, if you have, like I said earlier, if you have to bribe one officer for getting the employment of 10,000 people, then that's right, and that works well. Next, we have the Kantian ethics. This is for Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant is a very simple principle, which is don't do to others what you don't want to be done. So in this case, you can say, I don't want the employees to be working 12 hours without a break because I don't want to be working 12 hours without a break. So you will follow that principle. So if I think it's bad for me, probably it's bad for someone else too. Then we have the rights theories. In the rights theories, in this one, well, we just mentioned that there's a set of rights that all the people must have. So the right to speak, the right to rest, the right to communicate, many rights, fundamental human rights. So in this fundamental human rights, we will say that everyone must have access to those rights regardless where they come from, what they do, how they do it. Then we have the justice theory. So the justice theories, in this case, we say that, for example, everything must be fair and equitable. So everything must be just and fair, right? According to the law, according to general law, etc. Right? So in this case, everyone should have exactly the same thing. Right? So very good. So then we go to making ethical decisions internationally. So for this thing, we can take some certain actions. So for example, here we have favor hiring and promoting people with a great sense of ethics, not because of their race, not because of their biases. We hire them, promote them based on effort and meritocracy. A organizational culture that has good ethical values. In this case, since the very beginning, we must have an ethos that says we live and die by the rights of the people, right? From the very beginning, like the case we saw of this cosmetics, the body shop, right? That is already a good organizational culture of that. Decision-making process in place. So if we have already a modus operandi, we have a set of rules. If there's a corruption, then we decide not to make business. We just follow the rules. We already have a rule to follow, then no need to think whether it's right or wrong. If we already have a process to follow with specific rules and actions of what to do, then we don't have to think about it. We can think of ethical officers in the organization. This is a very, new position. Many companies are establishing it, which is the ethical officer is the one in charge of overseeing that there's no violation of ethics throughout the company. Or if, let's say, for example, as an employee, you see that your boss is doing something unethical, you're not going to go to say to him, boss, you're doing something wrong. Of course, he's going to fire you, but you can go to the ethics officer and discreetly and anonymously, you can say, well, here, something's fishy, right? Something's going wrong. Develop moral courage, the same thing. We have to develop that morality, saying we always do the right thing. Making the CSR responsibility of the enterprise policy. Again, like I said in the number 2, we have an organizational culture, and then we have a strategy that says we are a sustainable company, we're doing well. And that goes together with number 7 again. We pursue them and we make sure that environmentally we do good, socially we do good, we are growing also. It's our responsibility to make business too. So we do financially, environmentally, human, etc., etc. Okay, so in this case I already talked about this one. I already talked about all these ones. Okay, and then sustainability. Good. Okay, very good. So here we have the question: is sustainability bad for profits? No, it's not. In previous researches, it has been seen that companies that follow a CSR start to have more consumers. Let's look, for example, at the case of Tums. Tums started to give away free shoes. In this case, it has worked very well because they had made a lot of profits. But also we have to be very careful that it's not greenwashing. So what is greenwashing? We say that we're sustainable because for Tums, you buy one pair of shoes and we give another one to poor people. But when we look at that model, although it sounds fantastic to give away shoes to poor societies, you have to go to that country. And there's, for example, there was one documentary very interesting that it was showing how you affect that economy, because in the end, by giving away free shoes, then in that country, perhaps those people that sell shoes and that create a business and that move the economy are being hindered by those free shoes. So in this case, we can think always that all the actions that we have a reaction. So again, when talking about sustainability, no, sustainability does not affect business. Actually, when it's a good development plan, we can achieve very good goals financially. Again, we have platforms financially, socially, environmentally. When you can fulfill those 3 platforms, that means it's a good strategy. And that means if you're not doing well financially, that means that strategy is not good. So that's what we have to think about. So that's all for today. If you have any questions, please make sure that you contact me anytime. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.